I'm gonna just open up with my comments. Going to be on the marijuana thing, saying we're working on it.
But if you want me to say anything else, you'll tell me.
No.
Yeah? Okay.
Let's just say you and I have talked about it. We're working on it.
Okay.
Put it on for an agenda in the future.
All right. I didn't contribute a whole lot to that pre-meeting meeting, that two-hour drive from Duxbury. Apparently took a lot out of it.
Oh yeah, no, I get it. You know where I was trying to go.
Yeah,
with this. That's
yeah.
I just want to move.
Yeah, no, that was the meeting before with Brian.
Brian.
And
That's fine.
struggling. Okay, I'll be here.
Yep. What's up, Brian?
Good evening. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Selectmen, Monday, July 31st, 2017. My name is Jim Whitehead. I'm the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. With me tonight, Mariano Golbuff, Lance Grensbach, Dave Arico, Mike. What's your last name? Betancourt, our town manager, Richard Howard. We also are graced by our town council, Art Krieger, and of course Patty Mon, our recording secretary. So our next meeting will be August 14th, 2017, and also we'll also meet August 28th, September 11th, and September 25th. With that, I would note that work is proceeding on several major projects here. Expect the town manager will give us a more detailed report. I wanted to acknowledge the resignation from the Conservation Commission of Steve Parkhurst, who has 49 years of service to the town of Winchester, and I just want to acknowledge that extensive service. He was a mentor to many of us here on the board, and we will miss his counsel. So with that, I would ask other selectmen if they have comments. Mariano?
Yeah.
Lance?
Yeah, just a very brief note. As the board is aware, we've been working on what we've dubbed as the Selectmen's Road Book. It's a compilation at a higher level of, what's happening with pavements, what's happening with traffic controls, sidewalk improvements, pedestrian improvements, and so on, to bring all of that together into one program. We're well under the way of doing that. I think in September at some point we'll probably bring to the board a set of sort of formal suggestions and recommendations that are coming out of the work group. However, in July and August, I've discovered that most of my working group has decided to go on vacation, so we haven't been able to sort of complete a few things. However, work has been progressing. The DPW has, if you've noticed, repaved a large section of Highland Avenue and put in ADA ramps and done a lot of other improvements on there. One of the things they will contract for in the next weeks is to put striping back on the road, lane markings. And one of the conclusions coming out of the working group meetings was that one of the simple tactics to reduce speed is to reduce the visible lane width. So what we've been talking about is moving from sort of just a center line and no sidelines to a center line on our major roads and a 10-foot lane that's marked by a white line on the right side. I've given the photograph to the board members to give you some sense of what a 10-foot wide lane looks like. The Federal Highway and Mass DOT have basically told us that visually restricting the lane width tends to slow people down considerably. A standard interstate highway lane is 12 feet because you get a lot of speed variation, but 10 feet seems to be pretty acceptable in areas. The state will probably paint 11 or 12-foot lanes on sort of the, Route 3 and things like that where it's appropriate. But 10 foot is pretty applicable to our roads like Highland. Right now, that lane, Highland has about 14 feet on each side of the side. The curbs are not marked at all. People tend to treat it as though it was an interstate and rocket down there at 40 and 50 miles an hour. In some cases, it's dangerous. So the residents have been discussing with the working group, pulling that down. I talked about this with Jim and Mike Wise, and they're about to go out to do it. So in anticipation of the fall discussion of this, I'd basically like to ask the board to sort of adopt it as a provisional standard, subject to Beth and Jay looking at it. We would probably do this street by street, not looking widely at all of them just to do this, but to make sure that we have sort of a general policy in place before we go out to contract. I think in the case of Johnson Road, we were going to do this, but I think the contractor got out there before Jay did, and they painted the stripes out quite wide, and so we've not been able to sort of reduce that one. But at least on Highland and a few of the others, we'd like to sort of move forward on this. So, I don't know whether we want to take a formal action on it, but I think I'd like to have the town manager aware of the discussions and perhaps make sure that Jay and Mike follow through on that, which I think they're quite willing to do. The other effect of putting the 10-foot lane is that you may not have 3 or 5 feet on the side, but you do provide a sort of a de facto bike shoulder. It gives a little bit more definition, and we've had a lot of people concerned about the fact that cars drift into them as they're going down because the lane is wide. So we're looking both to sort of reduce the speed of people, who dial up on their ways and say, run through Winchester at 50 miles an hour, you'll get home quicker. There's also provide some safety, some margin of safety for bike riders out there during the good weather. So that's the long and short of that. So I think it's sufficient to make note of it.
Get the discussion on. Yep.
So, and then in the fall, we'll bring back a more formal set of recommendations.
All right.
Actions.
Dave?
No comments?
Mike?
Nothing right now, thanks, Jim.
All right, with that, we'll turn to the town manager's report.
Thank you, Jim. As the packet shows, there are a series of things to either bring to your attention or to talk about. Under B1, we have a couple of appointments. The good news is the engineering department, if you can recall, Matt Heringer didn't retire, but he pursued an opportunity out in Oregon, and therefore we had a vacancy in the position of assistant engineer. Beth Rudolph went through the process of interviewing quite a few folks and has settled on offering the opportunity to Brian Carrigan, currently of Waltham, and the information is in your packet. Again, we bump up a little bit against this 15-day kind of, not veto period, but period where
Waiting period,
the
yes.
board can weigh in and maybe make alternative recommendations in the effort to allow the person to be able to notify their current employer and count on the fact that they can move forward on a date to begin employment in Winchester. I would ask you to waive that so that we can allow Brian to move forward with the expected start date in Winchester.
Mike, could we then have a motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move that we waive the 15-day employment waiting period to allow Brian Kerrigan to begin employment as soon as possible for the position of Assistant Town Engineer for the Engineering Department, Grade E, Step 8.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Nay? No, everybody has it. Unanimous.
Thank you. I'm sure Beth appreciates that. And also, in the packet is information regarding the new police dispatcher's position, Corinne Holmes, being recommended by Chief McDonald. We don't have the same kind of timing issue there, so I'm just bringing it to your attention that Corinne will be brought on board as time allows. Any questions on that from the, have the memo from the chief?
Qualifications look excellent.
Chief was very happy at the
Hiring her away from Cambridge.
Cambridge, yes.
two most recent hires that he actually had in 911, so he's got a very experienced staff in there. And replacing a person who had been in there for a long time as well, so turned out very well. And then also under the report are a variety of topics on the town's response to the proposed 40B project on Highland Ave and Dana Road. We've received confirmation from Mass Housing that our time to respond is now the 18th of August, which lines up a little bit better with the board proposed future dates, and we will take up that topic of the board's response on the 14th, Monday the 14th. And also, as we've reported, we continue to talk to that proposed development team about potential alternatives at that location, but nothing new or absolute to be able to report there yet. The staff has continued to meet. Commentary has come in from a variety of departments, all of which will help make up the board's response that will be under consideration on the 14th. So, any questions on that? No? Otherwise, you also have for consideration your bylaw review committee update. As you know, the 10-year review of the bylaw is due and a report to town meeting. We do need a board representative on the committee that was established at the last town meeting. So we'll take any volunteer or any chairperson's appointment. So.
I think I saw a hand.
Duly noted. Thank you, Mr.
A helium
Bowler.
hand there. Here we go. Thank you.
Appreciate
It'll
that.
be Mariana.
So Mary Ellen and the team will be notifying everybody when those meetings will begin. So, thanks, Mary. Another item that has come forward just recently, as you're probably aware, the legislation pertaining to recreational marijuana use has undergone a rewrite by the legislature, and there's been legislation that was recently signed by the governor this past week. And Art Krieger and I have talked about the fact that we should bring this forward on one of your agenda items for consideration, some of the alternatives for how towns can deal with whether or not recreational marijuana use would be allowed in the town have changed as a result of the rewrite to the legislation. And I think it's a topic that probably is timely. There may be some necessity for activity that or action that this board may take to wind up at town meeting in the fall, so we should keep in mind that the town fall meeting calendar is something we should keep in front of us as well as we get you to take up the topic. But Art and I have discussed bringing it forward for you, so whether we get it on your August 14th agenda or no later than the 28th.
This would be a draft bylaw, is that you would bring forward,
I think
or?
Art can answer more directly, but I think in the end, there may be a bylaw recommendation that would come out of the procedure that is available to the town under the rewritten legislation.
For the people at home and in the audience, according to the legislation, towns that voted against the marijuana law, which Winchester did, have a much quicker path to rejecting or denying the availability of pot dispensaries in the municipality, whereas for towns that voted in favor of the law, they require a full referendum of the town to vote against pot dispensaries in their community. So we are the benefit of having voted against the bill in the first place, and so we are in the position of being able to issue a bylaw that would prohibit pot dispensaries within Winchester. That will be brought to town meeting in the fall for their approval or rejection, one or the other.
I have a question on the memo on B3 says that we have to do this before December 31st, 2019.
That's when whatever town action has to be taken by. But obviously, if it requires a bylaw approval, then you're into November. You're into the town meeting cycle approval process. So you would want it scheduled for one of these town meetings that are upcoming, right?
All right.
Jim, can I, Mr. Chairman, so as far as the town, if, like in Winchester was voted down,
Yes.
townwide election, but is it this board, would it be this board that would have the ability to?
No, that's,
I thought-
Art can clarify
I
that, but,
thought that's what we were talking about.
well,
There's
that's,
been
there's
various
been,
reports in the news
Yeah.
about what latitude there is at either the Board of Selectmen level or at town meeting level.
meeting.
And this, again, the legislation was just signed on Friday, so we're kind of looking at what the correct interpretation is. But Art may have a more direct sense on that.
There's, as Richard said, there are some news reports that it could be done at the board level, but our preliminary conclusion is that it has to be done at the town meeting. It has to be a bylaw, but we will nail that down and advise you accordingly.
But not a ballot question.
Right, right.
right. Any other
Any other
questions?
questions on that? So we'll tee that up for your
All right.
future consideration.
Does the 14th make sense, or Art, does the 14th make sense, or do you need a little more time? Should we say the 28th?
The 14th makes sense. It's possible I'll need a little more time.
Okay, the 21st.
We'll try
Okay.
for the
28th.
Why don't we set it for the 28th?
We'll try for the
28th?
I'll be out on the 28th, so
Okay.
it'd be better if I get it to you before the 14th.
All right.
In case you want me here.
Sure. Let's plan on the 14th then.
Done.
Okay.
And not on the formal sheet of mine, but as you know, we have several other things going. Some are under the board's business items. We'll be talking about things like
Right.
Swim Winchester and other topics that are there. The Housing Production Plan Group meets beginning tomorrow. We've got a new meeting scheduled with folks from Mass Housing Partnership for potential technical assistance for the board's effort to figure out what happens at Waterfield Road and the parcel there. So all of those things have been kind of scheduled and calendared, and we're moving forward, so.
And I might add that the paving work continues in town. You probably have also seen the trucks, Eversource is conducting a tree trimming program throughout the town to protect this. The objective of this tree trimming program is to protect the wires from being damaged during a storm. And it's can basically affecting trees that abut or infringe upon the power lines, so that they cut a path so that the limbs won't fall on the wires and cause you to lose power in a storm. There's also ongoing work from the Department of Public Works to remove lead necks that are, a certain number of lead necks remain in the town. These are 2-foot-long connections between the water main and the line leading into your house. Those have been, we're slowly but surely removing all of those, and that program has been ramping up in conjunction with the street paving program. So with that, I'll move on to matters from the audience. This is where you in the audience have a chance to come forth and discuss anything that is not on the agenda. We do not take up, because it's not on the agenda, we can't take it up as a matter to vote on anything or take any action relative to that, but we can put it on a future agenda. So if there's anyone at this point who would like to come forward for a matter that's not on the agenda, and I will mention that as far as when we get to the Winchester, the Swim Winchester presentation, we will be taking comments from the audience. So, any other comments? Not seeing none. We'll move on then. There's no controller's report. There's no licenses, no hearings. So we'll move right on to the business item. First item of business is the appointment of Linda Spiller to the Cable Advisory Committee. Linda, are you here? No? Seeing that she is not here. Did you have not heard from her?
Not heard a word.
Do we want to maybe postpone that to a
Yes.
future? Let us then postpone that to the 14th, and we'll see if we can get her in for an interview. That'll bring us to the MWRA borrowing. Sheila? Sheila Tracy, our treasurer.
So what we have for your approval tonight is an MWRA borrowing. It's for a sewer rehab program, phase 2. We've already received money in the past for phase 1, and this is now phase 2. The total award to the town from the MWRA is $647,900,000. And $485,925 is in the form of a grant, so no repayment required. And then there's a loan portion. This is what we're gonna approve tonight. And that's in the amount of $161,975, and it is a 10-year repayment period with no interest. So what we have is the sewer bonds and the certificate to sign, but Mike has the actual vote to be read into the record.
Mike?
Do you want to make a motion first, or do you want me to just read as we go? As it is, I mean, it's really written that we voted, so you really need a motion first.
We need a motion first, yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the sale of $161,975 sewer bond dated August 14, 2017 to the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority, and allow the town treasurer or other appropriate town official to execute on behalf of the town a loan agreement, financial assistance agreement with the authority with respect to the bond. The bond shall be payable without interest on August 15 of the years and principals, and the amount follows. It's 2018 through 2027, in the installment amount of $16,197.50.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none? Okay. Motion carries. Now, you need to read the whole thing, do you not? We voted?
Yep.
Just the voted section, okay.
Okay, the voted, there's
Then
two
you-
sections,
then-
further voted or?
Yes.
Okay. Further voted that each member of the Board of Selectmen, the town clerk, and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing vote.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right, and you get the sign.
Okay, and I'll just stop and say the green one is the bond itself, it's a certificate of authorization.
All right,
Right, sure.
thank you, Sheila.
Thank you.
Oh, there he is. I see Dan back there. Dan? Next item of business would be a report on the update on the Assessor's Department.
Good evening.
Good evening. For those of you at home, Dan McGurl, who's the Director
Town
of
Assessor.
Director of Assessments, I guess is your official title.
Works.
And as you know, we've been bringing department heads to the board in an effort to just reveal what everybody does, how they do it, give a little bit of an update to the public so they put a name with a face. We've had a variety of folks that have been before you already, police department, engineering, DPW. Dan is a longtime assessor here and knows his business and can tell you a little bit about staffing, the kinds of activities that they have, contracts that they have for assessments, and how the state requires him to do what he does.
Briefly, for the past 30 years, it's been revaluations by the state requirements once every 3 years. This past year, they've changed a lot, and that'll be once every 5 years. This happens to be a year of our reval, so we're updating values once again this year. The state will be out in a couple of weeks to certify our values, saying that they're compliant with your guidelines. Values, as you can probably imagine, kind of going up again. It's been that way for quite a while here. Even when the market was down, we were pretty flat, but we really didn't have much of a decrease. The economy or the real estate values here in Winchester really hold very well. To do a revaluation, you look at the previous year's sales, which was calendar year 2016, adjust them versus your 2017 assessments, and make whatever adjustments you see at that point. In our office, we have two clerks, Beth O'Connell and Laurie Ferrioli. They both do a great job for us. We've had, in the past, we've had up to 3 people in our office, but with cuts and things, we dropped down to 2 last few years. We hire a company that does our software, Patriot Properties, where we use them also for some of their experience and expertise in valuations and some of their bodies to go out and do some of the work, go out and measure and list the homes and so forth. This year's revaluation is right on schedule. I presented the board last week values for the town. They're reviewing them. Like I said, the state will be out in a couple of weeks to go through it, and I assume it'll come through with the correct numbers that we have, and we'll be fine with that. I know there's a question on a piece of property you mentioned. I don't know if you want to talk about that one in particular or anything else, or...
Well, before you get into that, just a quick question in terms of, when you say revaluation, you're not actually going out to each individual home.
No.
Do you do that on an annual basis, a certain number of the homes, or
We
do you?
What we've done, state law, once again, is you have to go out and revisit homes once every 9 years. We completed that cycle 2 years ago. And since then, what we do, because times have changed, we have MLS software, giving us all the sales in town.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, before I had to go knock on the door to try to get in, I couldn't see much. Now I go on the computer and look, I see pictures of your home, I know exactly what's in there and so forth. So between the sales and the permits, we see, approximately 800, 900 homes a year, which is a good number. That's probably 12% each year, give or take. So we get through the numbers pretty quickly, going through them. Actually, it's probably higher than that. We're probably more permits than that. We're probably around 800 permits a year. So we do it once every 9 years. You have to go and make a visit to the person. But we're hoping from this point forward is any sale or permit, we're out there, we check it off, so we know we're on the reports. We don't have to go visit those homes during that time period. And they'll greatly reduce the homes we have to see. Obviously, people aren't selling the homes that quickly, doing permits every year, so there's still going to be a number of homes we have to go out and visit on an ongoing basis. But it's worked out pretty well in the years we've done it, and we were able to get it done during the summer months when people A little easier letting you in the home, the weather's a little better, you're not tramping snow through the house and everything. So no, we don't go through homes every year, but between permits and sales, we do it every year.
And commercial property in
The
town?
same. Each year, what we do with commercial, we send out what's known as an income expense form, where they tell us what they generate for income, for rent and expenses and so forth. And we use that data to adjust values as well. In a small town like this, we really don't have, as you all know, we don't have very much commercial property in town anyway. A chunk of it's just small condos, 955 Main Street, there's a whole bunch of condos up there. There's some stuff on Holton and E Street, but there really isn't a lot of commercial property here in town. So when things sell, they can't sell for premiums because it's so rare that it comes up available. But we do the same thing. We look at it on a market approach through sales and through income and expense as well.
Dan, you passed out a copy of the Patriots assessment sheet as an example here. They go through and document, the house, the age, the number of rooms, bathrooms, so a lot of details, things like that, and the size of the land and everything. How do they integrate all that information and give you a number to compare against the sales values?
Well, in a sense, it's already there, because each year I have an assessment based on the data you just mentioned. We have approximately 20 to 25 different neighborhoods here in town, and each one of those neighborhoods, in numbers, if you want to say 1 to 25, they have a certain dollar value per each neighborhood. So we look at those, we look at the style of the home that we can change the value on, the bathrooms we can change the value on, the kitchens, the condition, the age. There's about a good 6, 7 factors we really use to adjust the values in town. It's, as you see, it's all generated there in the software. It's basically, like anything else in real estate, it's location, and then it's condition.
Are the factors they use here in Winchester pretty much consistent with the factors used in other?
It is exactly the same, yeah. You have to comply with state requirements, so it's not like they could recreate it any different way. I mean, as you look at the land value here in town is probably 50% of the value anyway of any property in town, just the way the prices are. And in some cases, it's more, because you'll see homes torn down for a lot more than the land value alone, because there's no land available to build on, so they tear anything they down can to build a new home.
So the division between the land value and the house value is made how? Combination of the age of the house
Yeah,
or
age,
sales of the
age, condition, sales. You use sales, you can use tear downs, you can use the sale of the house, back out the value of the building, the difference being the land value. There's a couple different ways you can do it.
And in terms of the Board of Assessors, about how many abatements do they issue in a given year?
Oh, we don't give any out. I don't think we've given out.
How many people file?
That's even easier. There's about 40 people a year applying now. Nobody applies, and you don't come in either. They know we're not going to give it because the values are so good and values keep rising.
And Dan, do you want to talk a little bit about statutory abatements that people
Yeah.
are entitled to, and the
Yeah.
abatement process, what a person would have to do if they wanted
There are
it?
two things. One is if an abatement based on the value of the home. And you have a certain time period, the month of January, basically to apply for that. And you've got to come in and prove to us that your home's not worth what we have on it. I don't have to prove anything in a sense because we've already put our value out there. So you have to prove it.
And if they're not
If
satisfied,
they're not
they're denied,
satisfied,
they go to
they can
the
appeal to
appellate
the
tax.
appellate tax board. We have 90 days to act on the application, and they have 30 days to appeal. 90 days to appeal. Then they go to the appellate tax board. I go in there periodically, but I would say in the last 10 years, if I've gone in there 20 times, I don't think I've lost once, because the numbers, it's just so easy to justify the number that they're just not going to give them anything back. But for others, there are senior exemptions based on your income and your assets that would help them reduce their taxes and deferrals as well. The Council on Aging is going to run a little program later, I think it's in August, where people can come down, we'll meet with them and talk about the process, see if we can help some people out who, having a tough time making their taxes and so forth.
Exemptions for
Exemptions.
veterans.
Veterans, you have to be injured during the course of duty. In this case, unfortunately, as you know, the World War II veterans in particular are dying off at a rather rapid rate, so the number of those people getting them is going down quite a bit. But it's more of the seniors on an income basis and asset. If they qualify, they come in, get some money off in the taxes that way. It's the best way to help them out that we can.
So we have a few programs. We have the, volunteering for the town, and there's some tax abatement, and then there's the deferment.
Deferral taxes.
deferral. Does that come from the overlay fund, or is there a different funding source for those?
It all comes from the overlay fund. Deferrals, even though you're not paying in taxes, we're charging 4% interest on the money. So we get our money one way or another, but it hopefully helps out someone get by, for a couple tough years,
Yeah.
having it before they sell their home or whatever the case may be.
I think it probably is worth, you may well be aware of it already, but the board several years ago started looking at the social needs in the town for support for seniors and others, and this came up, part of the questions about what use we were going to be able to make of the Fletcher Fund that the board controls. I think the Council on Aging has taken the lead, and they're putting out an RFP for.
It's an RFP out now.
Yep, the RFP is out.
For a consultant to basically do a survey of the town and take a look at what our needs are. And one of the questions I know they were going to ask, I think maybe it was contributed by you folks, was, what's your housing needs? And the question was, do we have enough seniors who know about the program and are taking advantage of it? And if they know about it and don't want to take advantage of it, that's fine, but if they don't know anything about it.
There's a sort of pride issue with this too, coming in to file these things as well, so it's hard to
So
convince
I would
people.
expect, I don't know what the timeline is for the delivery of the results, probably some months from now, but one of the things that you ought to look at, and the Board of Assessors ought to look at, is the results of that. I'm sure the council and the town manager will make those results available.
Dave?
I would just say I was on the assessors for 17 years with Dan, and it kills me to say it, but Dan does a great job. It's been many years of service to the town, and just, the fact of that 40 abatement application kind of shows you how fine-tuned Winchester is as it relates to its assessments, and, a lot of credit goes to Dan and the work that he's done for many, many years.
I should give some to Dave too, but I won't.
And again, all of it eventually is approved at the state level.
Correct.
Anyway.
There's only so
Department
much
of
we can
Revenue.
do without them saying right or wrong to us, so.
Well, one of my colleagues raised the question about the apparent discrepancy between the land sale at 416 Cambridge Street and the assessed value, which was something on the order of $3 an acre and or a square foot rather, and even the property across the street from it was appraised at $15 a square foot. Just question,
Yeah,
I understand that you can't predict the sale value of a property,
Well,
but it just seemed to the underlying discrepancy
Right.
right across the street seemed a little odd.
It's simple in one sense. You buy one apple, you're gonna pay a quarter. You buy a bushel of apples, you're gonna pay a penny an apple. So that's kind of how that works out in the square foot price. But in this one in particular, the property you're talking about, when we went to assess it for that fiscal year, it was based on it being a single-family home. The ZBA hadn't approved the 40B project until April of last year. So I can't assess it as a apartment complex or 40B until after the fact. It was then immediately appealed anyway, and then this year it just sold about a month ago for 3.2. So this coming year, now that I have the ZBA permit approved, I've got the sale, you can be sure that their value will be very close to what they paid for it. And I couldn't have done that in the past because I've been guessing what they were going to do, and I'm not allowed to do that. I have to know exactly what they're doing, and there's a certain dates. So as of January 1st of 16, it was a single-family home. January 1st of 17, it's got a 40B approval for 96 units. It's a whole different valuation system.
That I appreciate, but I guess I'm trying to look at just at the underlying, take the house out of the equation, and both at 400 Cambridge Street and 416, and you've got like a 3 to 15, 5 times difference between the two values.
You've got 5 times as much square footage in the other property as well. See, when I appraised it, it was a single-family home with one lot on it. So was the other one. So if you look at those two land values, one may have been a little bit higher with a little more land, but it's not gonna be double, triple, 4 times the cost because it's still only one single-family house lot. You can't have a 5-time discrepancy because the value's not there. And this year, like I say, we could because of the 40B approval on it. It's a buildable lot. You get some, you pay extra for having a little larger lot, but you're not gonna pay 2, 3, 4, 5 times the difference. You're not gonna pay that much extra for that much land.
Okay. Any other questions for anybody? Well, Dan, thank you.
All right.
Thank you for
You're welcome.
17 years of service.
30.
13.
30.
30.
30. 30.
The 17 was the hard time with Dave.
It was.
Okay. Next item of business is Winchester Boat Club liquor license for August 21st, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. So are there somebody from the boat club here? Yes, would you like to come up to the table, please? Tell us your name and what the whole purpose of this multi-day,
Absolutely. My name is Jim Bowers, and I'm acting tonight as the liaison between the Snipe Fleet, which is a sailing group at the boat club, and the board members of the Winchester Boat Club. This is an important matter for us, and I took the time this afternoon to write a memo to that effect. I don't know if it would help. Do you have copies for each of you this evening?
Pass them around when you do.
Sure. Pass them out. That way as well. When it comes to the boat club, I tend to be very passionate, so I think I'm just going to read the memo, otherwise I'll belabor this conversation for an hour. Again, my name is Jim Bowers from the Winchester Boat Club. I'm a current board member. I'm also a member of the Snipe Fleet, which is a type of sailboat that houses its fleet at the Winchester Boat Club. Many of you know the boat club. I'm not going to get into a ton of background, but I thought it was appropriate to give you some sense of who we are as an organization, what we're trying to do with this event. The Winchester Boat Club has been an important part of the Winchester community since 1900, and the clubhouse, built in 1907, still operates in its original location at 65 Cambridge Street, Winchester, Massachusetts. The club's mission is both social and educational. Over the years, tens of thousands of Winchester and surrounding community residents have learned how to safely swim, canoe and kayak, and sail on the waters of the Mystic Lake. Annually, the club partners with neighbors to treat the lake for nuisance vegetation and provides a home to the Winchester High School and Belmont Hill School varsity sailing teams. We do that free of charge to those organizations. We also have invested over $1 million to trap and remove sediment from the lake adjacent to the clubhouse in order to preserve and improve the water quality of the upper Mystic Lake. Most of the sediment appears to be coming from the town's sanding and salting operations during the winter months of the year. In terms of the snipe sailing in this championship event, there are over 30,000 snipe sailboats that have been built since the 1930s, and they are actively raced in dozens of countries all over the world. The Winchester Boat Club is home to one of the country's most storied and vibrant fleets in the United States, despite our small sailing venue on the upper Mystic Lake. We've been racing snipes on the lake continuously since the 1930s. Based primarily on the strength of our fleet and membership, we were selected to host the prestigious 2017, I'm dating myself, 2017 Junior and Senior U.S. National Championships for the first time ever. This event will bring world champions, Olympic medalists, and competitors from all parts of the country to Winchester, Massachusetts. This is an incredible honor for us. Typically, these are venues like Newport and Annapolis and Miami and San Diego and San Francisco. For Winchester, Massachusetts to host an event like this is simply unheard of. We are expecting up to 50 two-person teams, many of whom will be family members competing together. The racing schedule consists of the following. We will host the Junior Nationals the weekend of August 19th and 20th, followed immediately by the Senior Nationals Monday through Friday, August 21st through 25th. In terms of logistics, and I think this is what people want to hear the most about, while this event has fewer attendees than many of the Winchester Boat Club social events, it is still roughly twice the size of our recently held annual regatta, which is called the Winchester Invitational, and will run primarily during the daylight hours for 7 consecutive days, including those Junior Nationals on the preceding weekend. Accordingly, we have made special arrangements to ensure a smooth and successful event for the competitors, our members, and our neighbors. Specifically, we are scheduling the event at a time in the season when lessons have finished and the club is typically quiet. We are limiting the consumption of alcohol to Swanson Cove, which is a piece of land directly adjacent to the club, or inside the clubhouse if there happens to be inclement weather. And that would typically be a thunderstorm or something like that. The housing of competitors with local house and encouraging carpooling. We are also arranging for off-site parking at the Ambrose School with shuttle service back and forth to the boat club. We are planning a 30-foot by 60-foot tent on Swanson Cove with sides protecting our closest neighbors from the ambient noise. I will note that the clubhouse is not ADA compliant, nor is it adequately ventilated for large gatherings, so going indoors is not an ideal scenario for us. And finally, scheduling only one significant event at the boat club, which is dinner on Wednesday, 8/23. Other events we have taken off-site. They will be housed one Monday night at the Medford Boat Club and Friday night at the Woburn Country Club. We'd love to do it at the boat club. We just thought it was probably too much for the membership in the neighborhood. We expect that competitors will enjoy the Winchester dining scene on other evenings, so we expect people to come into town and enjoy the restaurants. What we're requesting, and with some context, in addition to the racing, sailing regattas are social events. The request is for an alcohol license to support after sailing social from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. 9 p.m., by the way, is the time the club typically closes on the following days, which is that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. After considering our schedule, since this was submitted several weeks ago, we would like to amend our application to allow for an extra hour to go to 10 p.m. on the evening of Wednesday, 8/23, to support our only club-sponsored dinner that evening. The club has a long history of hosting social events of at least this size for 310-plus family members with minimal disruption to the neighborhood. We host a handful of these events each year, and this is a particularly important milestone for the snipe class, the Winchester Boat Club, and the town of Winchester, Massachusetts. We respectfully request an approval of this amended license, as has been the case with our previous applications. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Any questions? Mariano, any questions? No?
Not at this time.
I guess traffic management and parking, we want to, since that's been one of the flashpoints of concern, what arrangements have you made for, I gather, some discussion of off-site parking?
We've been in touch with the schools and the police department regarding parking cars and boat trailers as well up at Ambrose, and then renting a van and hiring a driver to shuttle back and forth.
Okay, so that would be all 4 days or all the 7 days that are?
The junior regatta is typically a much smaller event, so what we're planning through is Monday through Friday.
Okay, so most of the visitors' cars and their trailers would be allocated to Ambrose area?
Correct.
Okay, is there sufficient space there?
There is.
Okay.
There is.
All right.
And I'd like to also add that it's typically a time where our membership usage of the club is very low. People tend to leave town at the end of August once lessons are over and their kids are no longer involved in the club event. So there'll be fewer members using the club as well.
Okay, and since there'll be a lot of people there, have you had a chance to talk with Lieutenant Crew about management of the traffic and drop-offs and pickups? Not everybody manages to pay attention to the flyers. I'm sure you'll send out with instructions. Will there be, I presume you'll have a police detail available?
We haven't at this point hired a police detail. We have a standard drop-off procedure within our parking lot because it's so small that we will be enforcing, which is to pull all the way through the parking lot.
But I presume there'll be people arriving and leaving roughly at the same time, so you're going to get a surge of traffic at both times.
We've never done that for any of our other
I'm not
events.
concerned so much about your parking lot. I'm concerned about the traffic on Route 3 where
Yep.
being vacation period, there being less traffic, people tend to sort of run down that road rather quickly in the evening. Standing on the sidewalk is an education to people's obedience of traffic laws, so.
Yeah, we've had larger events. We've never done that in the past. We're open to that. I mean, safety is important to us. It always has been. So if that's something we feel that is important or people would like us to do, we would do that.
And more practical, you've made provisions for temporary toilets and others on the property because with 100 people, be quite a run on the facilities.
We think our facility is okay. Again, we've hosted many more.
Are they ADA accessible facilities?
Many more people. We do have first floor bathrooms that are ADA compliant. We have not provided for additional porta potties. We do spend a lot of the time, most of the day, if not all the day, on the water, and people will be going over to the Medford Boat Club as well.
Dave?
A few comments, but first I'd like to say congratulations on being chosen as the site for the 2017 National Championship. Just quickly, how do you get chosen for that? Is it
It's a bid process.
bid process? So, congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you outsource the beer and wine, or are you doing that in-house as far as dispersing?
We're planning to do it in-house,
Do it in-house.
as we do with our other events.
I would concur with Lance, maybe talking to Officer Drew or whoever, or at least be open to that if it is needed according to the police. I probably want to have that flexibility so that gets done. And then just, I know you're amending the 8:23 to 10 p.m. If you wanted to, on the application, it says number of persons attending the event, it says 100, so you should probably amend that to if it's 310.
No, that's the number of members we have. We're only expecting about 100 competitors at this event.
Okay.
So we have membership events with 300-400 people, and we manage just fine. We're
Okay.
expecting 100 competitors here with a much lower membership attendance because of the time of the year.
Right.
But will you have spectators as well for this event, or, you know, that would add to the crowd, or how does that work?
Some people that travel don't typically have spectators, and of course, spectators, you can't see anything from a racing perspective from the boat club, so they'll be along Mystic Valley Parkway and over at the Medford Boat Club.
I think we have our safety officer.
It's actually our lieutenant in charge.
Lieutenant in
We
charge.
actually have a new safety officer. Everybody's been used to sergeant crew, he's now lieutenant crew, and those duties, as the lieutenant will tell you, they're now taken over by Sergeant Batchel.
Sergeant Frank Batchelor, yeah, brand new, so we're still teaching them the ropes. The Chief McDonald's on vacation this week.
Right,
so
and
that's why.
you're it.
I know, yeah. So I just wanted to also state too that we have been in contact with the boat club a couple different times with meetings, and the subject of details has been brought up.
And as the lieutenant will tell you, it's a call of the chief as to whether or not the detail is needed.
Yeah, the chief, the safety officer, and the actual establishment too, so.
And we're open to that if that's the logical
I
conclusion.
think it's a smart move.
Yeah, especially given Route 3, I think,
Right.
Yep.
you know.
And it's something too that can be amended too, you know, if it's gonna be a 4 or 5 day period, we try it out on the first day, see how things move, see how smooth it goes, and then we can work it from there, whether it needs more or less, or any at all.
I would guess that on the first day, everybody's bringing their boats and putting them in the water, and then after that, you know, or do they come in and out every day?
There'll be a stream coming in, you know, over the weekend. By Monday morning, everybody's already got their boats there and set up and ready to go. So, you know, there will be a rush of people getting there, either through the shuttle van or bikes or walking, depending on who's hosting whom and where they live in town. I plan on biking myself.
Now, typically, we get a lot of complaints from folks on Everett Avenue about parking. Are you planning to request people not park on Everett Avenue, or are you expecting people to just make their own way?
It's our primary overflow parking, if you will. I mean, the lot fills up relatively quickly. There is some parking on Route 3. It's not the safest place in the world to park. So Everett Ave is the next logical place for people to park.
Any proactive, maybe communication with the neighbors?
So
Hey, this week, you know, we'll get this big thing going.
So we are planning a memo very similar to the one that I just read, out to the neighbors to inform them that this is happening, just so they can be prepared for it, and also to include contact information.
So have you met with anybody from the neighborhood, you know, about this proposal yet?
We have not yet.
I'll say as well, congratulations, this is a big event to come to Winchester, and seems very cool. I guess my concerns are, this is a kind of a big ask. It's a little bit out of the ordinary for the one-day permits that we typically issue. And there's a lot of exposure on the safety side. And as far as the neighborhood too, as you said, typically this event is in larger areas. So we're really kind of shoehorning a extremely large event into what is essentially a neighborhood. So it's a use that's not typically there. So, and I think that impact will be felt by the neighborhood. I'm also concerned about the kind of controls that are put in place to make sure that people aren't drinking and wandering off the property. I don't know whether they're bracelets or they're, confined to a tent area. I don't even know if our zoning allows us to issue a permit on Swanson Cove. So, we may have to do something different there. What I would propose is we have another meeting between now and your event. Our next meeting is on the 14th, and maybe we work with a conditional acceptance and kind of put a few things in place. Certainly details will be necessary for an event of this size and scale. And hopefully the chief will agree with that. And then, maybe getting together with the neighborhood and having some of the leaders of this program on your side and the neighborhood kind of get together and see if they can come to agreement on certain things. I don't know, so 10 o'clock is just for one evening that you've asked for an extension on. So, my recommendation is that we kind of approve a conditional acceptance and then add some traffic management requirements and some police detail requirements, conversations with the neighborhood, and then at our next meeting, when all of that's done, then we move forward. So it's like I said, it's a big ask and a little bit different from what we usually see for these one-day licenses. So.
Yeah, I'd like to get more clarification on the shuttle to Ambrose, to the parking.
Okay.
I mean, you mentioned Everett Ave being standard overflow parking, but most of the events that are normally conducted are with a lot of residents of the town, and a lot of them might bike or walk, so there wouldn't be as many cars per attendee as this kind of event would have.
Okay.
So I'd like to see more details in this conversation with the neighbors on what that shuttle to Ambrose would be, and, if we can remove the cars from the immediate vicinity, it would also help from anybody stepping straight from having alcohol directly into their car, and having some cooling off period in a shuttle or something like that. So I'd like to see more detail around what has been hired as far as the shuttle is concerned.
Okay.
Yes, sir. What I'd say is, I think there's been some good precedents as far as having a national or regional event come to Winchester. I know several times, I think the Babe Ruth World Series was at West Side. I think the Winchester Country Club has had some prestigious tournaments. I see no reason why things cannot be ironed out, worked out logistically to accommodate the boat club. But I think everybody here has had some good input. I see no reason why, if we get a little bit more input, we can't move forward with this request. We just need to maybe fine-tune some of the things that the board's brought up to.
I think Mr. Bettencourt raised his hand, and I'd be happy to help him to sort of work with the folks in the neighborhood. There's been a great deal of friction. I think is a good opportunity to look at some of these issues. That intersection's been reconstructed. Parking on Everett Street, Everett Avenue, although it's been traditional overflow, is really tight and congested at this point. So the opportunity was, the hours I think seem reasonable, but we want to talk about noise control. The drinking may stop, but how long do the dance go on, sort of things like that. That's pretty standard stuff that I think we can work on. I think we could also, Lieutenant agrees, we have, the DPW has variable message signs that we can work with the state, put them out on the street on Route 3 to make sure that people know there's a lot of traffic out there. The district DPW district, DMT district out there, they want to contribute some materials and help
Yeah.
cones and stuff like that. It's small stuff, but I think it would
Yeah.
do it better. I think it would be very, I think it should go extremely smoothly for all the participants as well as the neighbors. I sailed snipes out of the boat club when I was much younger. I must admit, no one ever invited me to the Nationals for my performance, but I think it would be great.
Not yet, Lance, not yet.
I will try next year.
They have a senior tournament anymore?
They do have
I'm getting better with age, this is the technique, although hiking out on those things was a trial even when I was young. But I think if it's available to you, and I'll ask the town manager and the lieutenant and the neighbors, I would guess, a couple, 3 people
Yep.
would probably be sufficient for each group to figure out, we can add and do a second meeting. So I don't know, Mike,
Okay.
schedule, maybe you
Yep.
and Mike want to be in touch
Okay.
the next days on a time that's convenient for people to do.
That's not, these are all great ideas. I think they'll help make the event that much better.
Well, at
I
this
think it's a
time,
great opportunity to highlight, to Winchester, to national groups. So thank you for participating in the bid and bringing this event to our town.
so at this point, I'd like to offer anybody in the audience who'd like to speak. I see a hand. You'd come forward, state your name, and
Hi, Kevin Sarni, live at 54 Everett Ave. I'm a butter to the boat club. And I have 3 things I'd like to talk to the chair and the board about. One is the alcohol permit, your own application you have here talks about indoor events only. And what I'm hearing from the application is this will be possibly into Swanson's Cove. The other thing is, usually, and I've looked over the years, these one-day permits are issued for folks knowing who the audience is. This event is open to the public. There's plenty of information that's been out here on websites, it's been out for a while, advertising it. There's actually stuff that talks about a band going on. I don't know if that band's at the Medford Yacht Club or the Winchester Boat Club.
Medford?
This indoor events only is also very important. The town recently granted through the zoning Board of Appeals a second-floor deck to the Winchester Boat Club that was in opposition to what the neighbors wanted. If you're going to allow these outdoor events, I suggest you change your permitting process to allow the outdoor events, because it's also going to affect that deck. The next thing I'd like to bring up is actually zoning. And here's your zoning bylaws. Swanson Cove is an RDB lot. Outdoor recreation use is allowed with a special permit, which is what the Winchester Boat Club has. It excludes any use conducted for gainful business. Who knows if this is gainful to the club or not. Temporary public events are specifically not allowed in an RDB district. That's in the zoning bylaws. And commercial uses are also not allowed in an RDB district. So I make the argument that there should be no tent on Swanson's Cove for this event taking place. I'd like to talk a little bit about accessory uses. 3.21 in the zoning bylaws talks about no traffic should be generated in greater volumes than would normally be expected in a residential neighborhood. We normally have volumes from the boat club, but this is an open public event. Any need for parking generated should be met with off-street parking. I think Jim has said that there's some parking going on in Ambrose. That's good to hear. I'd like to actually see the plan for that happening. 3.3.3 talks about no major equipment can be parked or stored in any lot in a residential and SCI district except in an enclosed building. And it goes on to say major equipment is defined as boats and boat trailers except for 24-hour storage for offloading. So I don't know where they're going to put all these trailers. And I looked at the list of folks signed up, and there's about 50 some odd folks signed up. So say 30 trailers, 15, 20 feet in length. It's a lot of trailers. I'd like to talk a little bit about neighborhood cooperation. Since moving into this property, my family and I have been subject to numerous letters that are both harassing and just not true, designed to be bullying tactics by the club to obtain to do as they please at the expense of the surrounding neighborhood. I will distribute a letter that the boat club sent out to their membership in January 2017. This letter was drafted by Jim Bowers and Susan Schwartz from the Long-Term Planning Committee. It went on to blame the town and the neighborhood for all the host of problems that the boat club is having. It accused neighbors of taking photos of minors, which I find an absolutely disgusting, dirty tactic and not way of welcoming in neighborhoods.
We
I think
object to
this
that
stuff-
too. I thought this was an alcohol permit application, not a,
You had your
The meeting in
time.
order?
Yes, could we, let's,
I don't think that type of behavior should be granting of permits by the town of Winchester. I've had other letters accusing my wife of trespassing on the property in November of 16, and I got a certified letter in January 17 CCing the chief of police. I was never on that property. I was invited on it right away. Again, another harassing behavior by the club. In another 2016 letter by Commodore Scople, she basically said, the club's been around for 100 years before your house was there. If you have any issues with the club, call town officials. Nice. We live next to a club that refuses to communicate unless it's through lawyers, and if they can't get what they want, they litigate. This event tonight, as presented, is the first time myself or any of my neighbors heard about it unfolded like this. And this event, they gotten the approval from the sniper group towards the end of last year. And I sent numerous emails and letters to the town and to the chief of police asking for updates, and all I got was it's in the planning stage. Here we are weeks away, still not fully baked. I'm asking you to deny the permits unless conditions are set, and it happens on their SCI property at 65 Cambridge, and there's some control over the public coming in. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? All right, hearing none. We'll move along.
thank you.
So, I guess, at this point, I would move that we table a vote on it until our August 14th meeting, and in the meantime, direct the boat club to work with the neighborhood and with the town. Lance and I will work with them on traffic management issues, detail issues, alcohol controls, and any other issue. I mean, we haven't even approached the idea that there's going to be a lot of traffic around the Ambrose neighborhood as well. I don't know if we've reached out to anybody there as well. I mean, that's going to be just as much, if not more traffic, and even at later hours. So I think that maybe we table this till the 14th and try to work out some of the kinks so that we can make this event happen in a way that works for the neighborhood and works for the town.
I think I agree with that, because I think 30-foot trailers, I don't know that there's sufficient space at Ambrose to take 50, 30-foot trailers.
That would be the purpose of.
And I think you would need to take a look at the issue. They may want to, find some additional space.
Are they, and I should ask Jim this, but are they renting the space at Ambrose, or how is the town being compensated for that? I mean, we're certainly.
School department.
School department is, okay.
I don't know that it is,
Yeah.
but that's
We're
where,
not, no, they're just providing the space, there's no renting. And the trailers are about, the boats are 15 and a half feet long, the trailers are just longer than that. The boats are dry sailed, which means they sit on the trailer during the event, so the trailers will be at the club, the boats will be stored on them. There'll be a handful of trailers up at Ambrose School. Those that come cross-country carrying 2 or 3 boats, and they stack them one on top of each other, those will be the trailers that will move off to the side. We're maybe a dozen at most of those trailers.
We still have a bit of exposure, on town property if we have people coming in and out of there. I mean, I appreciate the willingness of the school department to, so maybe we can have a discussion with town council about that at some point, is what our requirements would be for that.
I think, I agree. I think generally we would table this. I think the point to be made to all involved here is that the boat club has been there for a long time, so the neighbors, the animosity has been sort of allowed to, I think, to sort of overgrow to the point where it's pleasant. And all of us, I think this is not going to solve all those problems, but it does seem to me that it's an opportunity to begin a discussion and find some practical solutions to the problem, parking and time and noise and space use and others. Again, I would not anticipate that we'll find all those solutions, but if there's willingness on both sides, both parties in the town to figure out some of the answers to this, sort of longer-term solutions that will work for the police and the boat club and the neighbors. This will be a short order effort at looking at those, not a long-term constitutional amendment that's going to make everybody happy or unhappy. So, I guess we'll leave it to.
Yeah, and we also have to be careful setting precedent, as, we approve a license that's kind of a little bit out of the ordinary for us for future events. So we'll be in touch with Mr. Bowers and the neighborhood, town council.
I hear Mr. Sardi volunteering to help.
Yeah. We'll see if the neighbors, who from the neighbors will be part of that conversation, so.
All right.
And Danny,
So you want to make a motion then to table?
Motion made, we need a second.
Seconded.
Yep.
Second. All right, any further discussion on the motion?
When are we coming back to?
14th.
14th.
Mr. Chairman, you're continuing the hearing.
It's really not a hearing, is it? Just a business item, right?
We'll pick it back up again.
Pick it up again on the 14th. All right, all in favor of?
Aye.
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 Okay. I would note that we have interpreted events inside tents, particularly things like the WIFI annual event, to be an indoor facility for the purpose of the liquor licenses. All right. Next item of business. Thank you. All right, next item of business is the Eversource Memorandum of Understanding, which I think is now in its final phase.
Yep, so this is before you for formal approval tonight. Attorney Macarios for us and Attorney Kuthin for Eversource continue to fine-tune some of the typographical and paragraph numeration items in the agreement, but as you know, we put this before you at a meeting that I didn't attend on the 17th, but we think it's in the form with that final change, authorizing field engineering services over a 10-month period for an amount that's stated in the agreement, together with many of the other terms that we've gone over before, but we recommended it to you that night. We recommend it again to you tonight for final approval, and it'll be subject to probably some Scrivener's activity that both Mina and Kathy Kuthin work out on the final format.
I thought that's had already been done. Is that?
Yes, I have the amended one out in the office.
Okay.
But I can take any questions on it. The main features, as you know, so just for audience's edification, this is the proposed 115 kilovolt project that runs from the Mystic substation in Everett to the substation in Woburn, comes through the cities of Everett, Somerville, and Medford, and eventually comes onto Main Street in Winchester, works its way over to Bacon Street, goes up Bacon through the intersection at Church and Fletcher, and continues on up Wildwood.
Wildwood to
Up to
Woodside.
Pond, Woodside to Pond, and as, so there's no definitive time as to when the project will start. They continue to negotiate other memorandums of understanding and rights-of-way in the other cities and towns as well. I think the main construction period for the project is expected to be the spring of 2018 through the summer of 2018. Their tentative completion date was the very end of December of 18, as proposed in their submission to the Energy Facility Siting Board. We may, depending upon the start date, end up pushing past that, but for a certain period of time, within that time frame, activity will be in Winchester, and obviously in all of those other communities, as well as the trenches being dug to lay this new power line. So we've negotiated a series of mitigation measures within the agreement. Some we think are very beneficial, and some are cautionary, requires that Eversource do certain things around traffic management and dealing with the town on grant of a right-of-way. That'll be a hearing that'll be
Right.
scheduled as part of this process as well. So, but we think the agreement is in the format as we've presented to you before, after prolonged negotiations, that we recommend to you to approve, and I think it's authorizing me to sign, or maybe the chairperson to sign on behalf of the board, whichever the board desires there.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes.
There was some late discussion this afternoon between
Nina and Catherine.
Yeah, and it doesn't have Kathy's final sign-off unless we refer to...
I've gotten an email from Mina that's saying that they believe Mina and Catherine Kuthin still have those couple of typographical issues to discuss.
The last email I saw was 4:55. So the authorization should be to sign in substantially the form that they reviewed.
Okay.
Just for those of you who haven't been following, and Mr. Howard's put a great deal of effort into this. This is for the 115 line. It's not the 345 line, so it's a different one. It follows the path that I believe there are two existing lines in this path. One is
A 115 active
one
line.
is active and one is dead. Dates back to before the 30s, I guess. But what the agreement covers is, and I think one of the significant changes is that it prohibits simultaneous construction. If the state were to say, go ahead with the 345 line, we have an agreement that they will not be constructing this one and the 345 at the same time. So it covers staging of materials, storage of equipment, work hours, traffic control, police details, permit openings, the detailing of that, soil management, basically what happens if stuff is excavated and it's tainted, snow removal, rats, rodent control. It has a whole series of requirements the engineering department wants that we get as-built drawings at the end, community outreach meetings with the municipality, and then Mr. Howard has negotiated funds to be used for improving the Winter Pond recreation area, as well as doing some design improvements for the intersection of Main and Highland, which is that nice Y as you come out of Bedford. It's a bit of a safety mess. We've also negotiated that they're going to pay for a field engineer work on our behalf to make sure that whatever they're doing is done correctly and in time. So it's been...
A design engineer, field engineer.
Yeah. So it's quite a complete, as I said...
Traffic management plan if we want that.
There's no radical changes since we reviewed
No,
the details.
yeah, this is all in the same format that you saw on the 17th.
And the process will be, in addition to signing this memorandum of understanding, they will come to us with detailed plans for grant of location, at which time we'll have the opportunity to add additional conditions if we feel that's appropriate, particularly in terms of police details and traffic management, so forth. All right, then can we have a motion to approve the agreement, or to authorize
Final approval.
authorize the town manager to sign on behalf of the town substantially?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize the town manager to execute on behalf of the town of Winchester the memorandum of understanding with Eversource for the proposed 115 kilovolt transmission line project, subject...
I would make it in substantially the same form that's currently proposed, and with the final advice of council.
in substantially the proposed form, including subject to any of the changes by, small changes by council.
Seconded.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All right. Ayes have it. Opposed?
Say thank you as well to the town manager. This has been a
Long road.
a long road, and
team effort.
we appreciate the work that you've done in working with town council to dig your heels in and get some value for the impact area of the neighborhood. So thank you.
I think the final note is that Eversource was not exactly forthcoming
To say the least.
in about 9 out of 10 of these areas, so.
Yeah, well, nonetheless,
A lot of frank diplomatic exchanges.
Can't wait for the 345.
yes.
That was the easy one.
That was-
Let's hope the siding board sees it the same way we do and roots it in a different direction.
All right, next item of business is the update from Swim Winchester.
So I believe we have some representatives here who can sit at the table, take some questions. I can provide a kind of a verbal update to the board. As you know, a while back, you authorized us to talk to our own environmental consultants, that's VHB, who are overseeing the activity on Skilling's Field for both the culvert and the soil remediation for the project there. In addition, we now have the synthetic field project that is being overseen by VHB as well. And as part of all of that preparatory work, and going back several years now from the time we first had the testing done by VHB for the culvert project, which turned up the fact that there were concerns about the soil. There's been a substantial amount of testing that has characterized that soil, and over the course of the project that we've been running over the last 18 months or so, all the soil has been remediated and taken off-site appropriately. But also, since the town has at least had the proposal to entertain a possible community swimming pool at the Skilling site, one of the things that the board authorized to have happen was to at least have the environmental engineers from both the pool project and our own consultants compare notes in order to determine whether or not a location that's being proposed for the facility at Skilling's would be suitable in terms of that soil condition. And we believe in doing that, without causing potential responsibility or liability to the town, in an effort to get that information tied down as tightly as possible. So we think we've been able to do that without the requirement for any environmental testing at all. In addition, we think an additional step that could be taken in order to, again, determine whether or not the project is a feasible one from constructability standpoint is to have non-environmental testing done in order to determine whether or not the foundation system that the pool is now considering is something that is viable considering the conditions of the soils and the subsoils underneath there. It's not an environmental test, it's a constructability test. VHB believes that activity, in addition to the information that they've shared with the environmental consultant on the other side, can be done without causing any open liability or responsibility to the town under Chapter 21E of the Mass Contingency Plan. But the one step that we're going to take in addition to VHB telling us that is, and Art and I have talked about this today, is refer the information that's been supplied by GEI, which is the sub-consultant to Swim Winchester, and the analysis by VHB to Anderson and Krager, and make sure that they are in agreement that what's being proposed is a safe way for us to proceed to be able to get this additional information. Everybody should understand this is only preliminary. This is not an approval of the project at that location. There are many additional steps that would have to be taken by this body, but the school committee and town meeting. This is only extremely preliminary to the idea of whether or not something is feasible to begin with. Does not in any way approve the fact that the project will be there going forward It is merely a feasibility piece of information to figure out whether it's even worth having both parties proceed down this avenue. So that's kind of where we are. Art and I, as I said, have compared those notes at the board's request to have the combination of information by GEI and VHB looked at legally, and we'll do that. Tom, and I'm not sure the other respondent's name is here to be able to answer any questions about how SWIM Winchester would propose to move forward, and if the board had any other questions of them in the meantime. That's the update.
And I think it's also useful to mention that in their analysis of the soils on in that particular portion of the field that is where these tests would be performed, when they average out the tests across the field, they fall below the residential triggers for taking any action to remediate the field. You could actually
Across that section of the
across that section of the field, that the sections that have the contamination have been capped, as part of the plan. And going forward, they're going to put the use restriction on the field to prevent the cap being breached and so forth. But that would basically close the site as far as DEP is concerned. So any additional work that would done over here would be by a separate party, SWIM Winchester, if we eventually get to that point, and the liability would fall on them at that point.
For the purposes of our conversation today, though, we're only talking about the limited borings.
Correct.
It's the authority to enter,
Yep.
do the constructability boring, one or two of them, no environmental work at all. But, so a very non-invasive kind of process here.
So
And it's only for the purpose of that
we'll
preliminary.
discuss that at a later date on the.
Yeah, the idea of whether or not it happens and what kind of authority is needed to make the site available is a long way off.
So, good evening, members of the board. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to come back in and engage with you tonight. Again, I'm Tom Freund. I'm one of the members of the board of directors of SWIM Winchester, and I'm joined tonight by Frank Leathers. Frank, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Frank Leathers, geotechnical engineer with GEI Consultants, a senior vice president with the company, resident in Winchester, and very interested in this project, but your summary was exactly correct in terms of what we were asking for permission to be able to do. And
Yeah.
I can
To the extent, I think we can dispense with some of what I planned on saying, so thank you for the accurate summary. We, as an organization, stand committed to helping contribute to the vitality of our town, in this case through the addition of a community aquatics facility, and we've appreciated working with so many members of the town administration as well as members of the community to explore it to the point where we are today. And we appreciate all the input that we've gotten. This really is a community project, and toward that effort, we have solicited the directly input from members of the community across Winchester and specifically in the area abutting Skilling's Field. We've hosted informational sessions thanks to some of the neighbors in the area. We've walked door to door to talk to folks. We've sent letters to people who we haven't been able to directly contact through those door-to-door meetings. We've also submitted in your preparation packets a set of letters that members of the community have offered to write on our behalf. I was also pleased to note in this set of letters that you have at least two of those have come from abutters to the property. So there's broad support for this initiative across the town, which we're all really excited about. When we were last to see you, which was in January, you specifically asked us to pursue next steps related to having our consultants write up a description of how we would conduct a paper evaluation relative to understanding the soil conditions, and also next steps on the site assessment. As Richard said, that's what we've proposed in the letter that we sent to you in early January. We also sent it to the members of the school committee, and we've presented to them as well, since we understand there's really dual jurisdiction of the site. So again, in our effort to make sure all parties are heard and that this truly is a community effort, we're trying to go broad on that. As Richard said, this proposal is designed to address specifically the area of concern that's been raised in this case relative to the building conditions of the property. And we feel that the results that we would get from this next step would be beneficial not only to Swim Winchester and to the selectmen and the school committee, but also to the neighborhood as well. This would be public information that would help us all have a better understanding of exactly what construction methods would be required based on the soil conditions on the property. I'm pleased to note that this activity has been funded through generous grants from the John and Mary Murphy Foundation, the Winchester Mount Vernon House, and also through the Inca Society. These local institutions of ours very generously have gotten on board and want to help us all determine if this is a feasible project. So as Richard said, and I'll reiterate a couple of points, we're not here to ask for permission to build a pool in Skilling's Field. We're here to follow up on the letter that we sent, asking for permission to take the step that you have suggested, which is to conduct geotechnical borings in order to determine the building conditions and that would be necessitated by the environmental analysis. This would not include any soil testing for contaminants and would not open anybody up to any liability relative to potential determination of termination. So with that, I'm happy to turn it over to Frank, who can get into the details of exactly what it is that we are proposing would be conducted, if that's what you would like to hear. But you tell us.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'll try and keep it fairly short. Basically, we're proposing two things. One is to do what we would call an environmental phase one, or a paper study to collect available information from the Massachusetts DEP, whatever record may exist about Skilling's Field and the conditions at the site. No new information. We will not be taking any samples. We will not be doing any environmental testing. We'll be looking at information that was put together for the Skilling's Field project and summarizing all that for Swim Winchester so that they, as they plan their project and evaluate its feasibility, can understand what environmental conditions may still be there and how that might impact their project. The second part is a geotechnical study, and that's the part of the study where we will do 1 or 2 borings at the site. We'll engage a drill rig for 1 day and do as much drilling as we can. Probably if we're fortunate to get 2 borings done, one at sort of diagonal opposite corners of the building or the proposed location. Again, just to figure out what the soils are in that location, so that we can provide Swim Winchester with some very early advice as to what the foundation conditions are and what types of foundations may be needed, excuse me, for the structure. That's really it. That's what we're proposing to do as part of this phase of the study.
So Frank has put that in a very technical scope. The scope has been reviewed, again, by VHB. They have signaled their approval as to the scope and what the ramifications are. It's only recently been transmitted to Art's office. We just did that within the last day or so. So I'm not putting out on the spot at all, but they'll do the same review that the board asked for in terms of its legal, consequences, and I assume, I'm not trying to assume too far down the road, but I kind of assume that Art would agree with the analysis put forward by VHB, that it's it is something that can be done without liability. The one thing I would add, and I don't want to throw cold water or tamp down Tom's enthusiasm, but we know there are concerned neighbors, many of them that are sitting right there. We've received the letters. We know the school committee, has received the same level of concern. We know that's a huge bridge that's out there, whether or not it gets crossed or doesn't get crossed, it's out there. It's definitely something that somewhere along the line, either it becomes a meeting of the minds that in the end, town meeting gets a very big vote on or not. School committee and this body, as I said earlier, two kind of perfunctory preliminary votes to get made on the project as well. But so we're not looking past the level of concern and in some cases outright objection or a combination of the two that has been registered by the neighborhood. We think it's sensible if we're going to even entertain the notion of the project at all, to get some preliminary information that everybody can tell us is either a reasonable place to begin working from and tackle these other larger issues or not. So that's, the neighbors should be, should know that this is only a very, very early and preliminary step that is exploratory only.
Fred, just a question, Frank. In this particular area, my understanding from talking to VHB is that there's quite likely a significant transition in this area from a former swamp to perhaps a glacial till, and that I'm wondering whether two borings across a site where this transition occurs is going to be particularly helpful.
Well, you're exactly correct in your understanding, and at least that's how I look at the geology and the topography, and that's why we're saying our basic plan is to try and do these two borings at the diagonal corners, one in the sort of aspect of the building that's closest to the railroad track and sort of farther to the north, the other sort of the southwest corner farther out into the field. The concern from our standpoint as foundation engineers is going to be that softer soils that may be out farther into the field. So that's where our first focus is, because that's where the foundation conditions might represent some additional cost to the project. As you know, the high school's on pile foundations, and we're trying to assess how much of that issue may be present at the proposed building location.
If I can add, the location, Mr. Rico very astutely found in the back of the packet that we provided for you. We also had submitted a PowerPoint presentation up front, which also has that in if you have need to put it up for public consumption. But everyone can see in the packet the building site as we're describing. And one thing I'm always impressed by when I look at that site plan is the relatively small footprint on the overall property that this represents. It's really one small corner that we're talking about. So maybe, Mr. Whitehead, to your comments there, maybe the condition change over that relative to that area versus the whole might not be as large as, we won't know how large it is until we do it.
Trying to get a read as to how much it may change just across the building footprint.
Would you see the potential for an in-ground pool rather than, that might reduce the height of the building, which seems to be one of the objections that you're getting?
Again, part of the purpose of both
Is
the
to
environmental
study.
summary and the getting a little geotechnical information is to help make the assessment as to whether some of those things are feasible. Depending on what the soil conditions might be, partial in-ground pool might be feasible. It might turn out that We want to avoid excavating as much soil as we can. It could be that we want to collective benefit, get it down as much as we can. If it goes down very far, it'll be below groundwater, and that's another whole design.
Yeah, that's another whole issue, yeah.
Another whole design condition that has to be evaluated and its impact on the pool. You have to be able to drain the pool, and you don't want the pool popping out of the
Popping
ground.
out of the
so
ground, yes.
We have to have some foundation methods to take care of that. But it's certainly something that would be considered.
I assume we have a number of people in the audience, some shaking their heads at some of the information that's been given. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this time?
Why don't we slide down or vacate? It's up to you. You tell us.
Hi there, I'm Jeff Dean, and I'll be the spokesperson for the Friends and Neighbors
Okay.
on Skilling's Field. And we have two primary purposes. The first is really to talk about our passion for the field and any activity that takes place in there. That's our primary purpose. Just based on the conversation we heard and the people here that I'm representing, I think they probably would want me to express some concern of a few of the comments that we heard about the proposed effort that you're now seeking permission to go forward. And thank you, Tom, thank you, Frank, for your work on behalf of Swim Winchester. It's a project that's certainly worth exploring. Everything seems to be best effort. We're going to do a book report and read previous studies. We're going to get our drilling equipment and do as much as we can in one day, maybe one, maybe two. This is a swamp that we're talking about. In the preparatory materials, you received this slide as well, but I'll pass a few of these around. You can overlay where they're putting their location. There's two interesting things to see here. River and a swamp. That was in 1931. For 15 years, it was the town dump. For 10 years, we dumped incinerator ash. Right up to the boundaries of the neighborhood where the current fence is incinerator ash. Certainly, one of our concerns would be that if we are going to do any activity on the field, it should be a correct and proper set of activities that determine all the structural feasibilities. Let's do it once and let's do it right. If we're going to do that, we'd certainly like to go ahead and do that with environmental studies as well. So, again, you have letters from myself, from members of the neighborhood that aren't here, and those that are, as well as some of the officers of a new group that I wanted to introduce you to. This new organization is called the Friends and Neighbors of Skilling's Field. And so we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of the Board of Selectmen this evening. We consist of both neighbors and concerned residents throughout the entire town for a singular purpose, making sure that Skilling's Field remains a field. Our common purpose focuses on our need for three things: field space throughout this town. Demand is increasing, not decreasing. The last fields that this town built were these fields. They were built in 1968, 69, and they became active in 1971. Our population has grown, our demand for fields have grown, and we've spent millions of dollars building turf fields in order to add additional capacity. It would be a travesty to lose additional space for any project. We want to ensure that our town's investment in this field, as part of the high school project, as part of the flood remediation, is not compromised by any other activities on any field location as well. And probably most important to many people from a safety standpoint is keeping what is buried in the ground in the ground. There are certainly a lot of things that can be done to allay fears if you're not in the neighborhood. If you are in the neighborhood, you see the ash field. When the previous borings were done, steel cans came up, glass bottles came up. We don't know what's under there, and that's the point. For 200 years, this site has been abused. Tanneries were there, they dumped in that water. We certainly found lead. We've dug and put barriers under certain parts of it, but I'd like to see more borings. I'd like to understand if anything is going to happen to that field, what is under there everywhere. Our concerns are both short-term and long-term as the Friends and Neighbors. We're keen to engage as part of the Field's Master Plan project. We want to ensure that the turf field project and high school project address our concerns about traffic and noise. We want to voice our opposition to any project that takes away from open space. Certainly includes the siting of Swim Winchester at this location. And we more importantly want to make sure that we have a collaborative engagement with Swim Winchester. We've met informally for about a year. We've had 2 formal organization meetings. We've installed officers. We're putting in financial resources and structure in place, and we're seeking additional legal and financial counsel. We've made comments in front of the Field Management Committee expressing our concerns, as well as the school committee, and we'll be making a full presentation to the school committee on the 12th of September. I think we've asked for time to speak in front of this board and give our formal position on Swim Winchester as well. You've received letters, and we don't need to go about those. They cover topics from flooding to traffic to noise to safety. I think those are legitimate concerns that we'll address in that other presentation. There are many different reasons that our members have, but it's important to note we are pro-field and not anti-swim. In fact, we believe that Swim Winchester has already identified an ideal site for their swim project. It was their preferred site in their first selection study. It's the Middlesex Park site, which is net additive to Winchester. It's a much more central location. There's no conflict with the high school and the safety concerns that that creates, bringing out-of-town people and residents into our town. There's no flooding concerns, and there's no contamination. We want to leave what's in the ground in the ground. There should be no new borings, and more importantly, no new construction on this site, given the current multi-million-dollar projects that are scheduled to finally be completed. If the town does contemplate new borings or new construction requests from any party, we'd request that the town ensure that they are full and complete, and that a full environmental study access to an engineering firm of the friends and neighbors choosing also be given access, same as anyone else would be. We'd actually like to strongly encourage the board say enough is enough. Let's move forward with a swim project, but not at this site or the site of any existing field. The board has the opportunity to take a leadership position and help the town focus our energy somewhere more sensible, and taking Skilling's Field off the table is an option. Skilling's Field is now, and forever in the future, should simply be a field. That's our primary position, and so we'd like to engage throughout the town. We'd like to make sure we have more formal engagement with not just Swim Winchester, but other bodies that would like to use that field. We want to make sure that the lights, the parking considerations, the traffic flow of the existing projects are addressed. To back up the current swim site into the farthest corner of the field adds, is that a quarter mile of additional driving? You can, just once you exit the road, if you park in the neighborhood, you can actually cut 1.5 miles off of your drive to the swim site. I don't know about you, but I do know what I heard earlier today from Selectman Grensbeck, and this is a quote, pretty accurate. Not everyone follows parking lots and traffic laws in describing the boating club. I think that holds true for parking towards swimming sites. If you need police details to manage 100 people showing up at a boat club that has 300 members, you probably need to have a significantly better management plan to have people in place, to have hundreds of people next to our high school who haven't been Cory checked or SORI checked, and are going to have access to our fields and not from Winchester. That's our prepared comments.
Right. If I may just comment one thing, I think you're in error in saying that there hasn't been a thorough environmental study conducted. VHB has done a significant number of borings on this site, including 11 borings in the specific area where that pool is being proposed. We'd be happy to make that report available to you. It's on file at the DEP. You can go there and get it as well. It's a public document.
We've looked at the DEP report, and I don't think I suggested that a thorough environmental study wasn't done for other projects. This is a net new project. Not all of those borings, I believe, in that site were environmental. We would like to review how deep they were and what they uncovered, absolutely.
Well, certainly that's in the report that we can make available to you.
That's great.
But I think as I pointed out earlier, what VHB has reported to us is that the borings, particularly in that section, all turned out to be below any testing. All the tests that were done came in below the residential standards of DEP, which is to say that you could build a house on that lawn.
And so I did want to discuss that as well. The site that Swim Winchester would like to use was a buildable house lot until 1968.
Yes.
The town of Winchester, through eminent domain, took those lots of land, deemed them unbuildable, and valued them as unbuildable open space. And that private property was taken from residents of our town at that price for a purpose. If we're going to repurpose land that was private, that was made public and open space, and then return that to a private entity, I think it does call into certain questions about standard legal property rights for all of our citizens.
I believe the process that's envisioned is not to turn the property over to Swin Winchester other than through a lease. That lease would require a vote of the town meeting in order to change the taking, and you
Well,
can explain that further.
There are a lot of, again, we're getting into deep high grass territory in terms of what has to be done in the long range to have anything happen, but there's a piece of legislation that was put together back in the 1960s that combined or put under school authority both the field side of the Skilling's proposal and the Winchester High School side of the proposal. That law would have to be amended in order to allow something like this happen. The school committee has to vote on it, town meeting has to vote on it. Yes, so a 99, whether the format, we're way away from being there, but whether the format to allow the project to be located there is a long-term lease or an outright disposition of the property to a nonprofit entity, remains to be seen, but the point is well taken. It was taken for public purposes then. It was put into the legislation that was filed that put it under the authority of the school committee. All of that has to be addressed as part of any kind of plan to either have a swimming pool or anything else there for that matter.
As well as the special permitting, which under
absolutely.
9.4.2 has 7 criteria. This project fails 5 of them, probably all 7. So we can go that.
There's all kinds of debate that can be had.
Exactly.
But we're not, again, I'm trying to stress the point that what's being asked for, and what the board has previously authorized management to try to go out and accommodate, is way far away from the end result that I know many of the neighbors would prefer to avoid, but we're not there yet, and this is, again, extremely preliminary to any kind of final steps that would be necessary to approve the project.
And in parallel, we're conducting a field management study, which would be taken into consideration. Any siting to Swin Winchester would be taken into consideration along with that study as well. All right?
All good points, though.
All good points. All right, any other? All right.
I would just say thank you for your comments and representing the neighborhood. I know that we've had various exchanges in our meetings throughout this process, and I would just encourage you, especially that you've established a more formal organization to meet with Swin Winchester and to discuss some of these issues, and certainly the town is willing to hear any proposals, or certainly on the traffic side, I feel like that's something that that we can probably resolve. So
Wonderful.
We welcome that.
Yeah.
All right. That concludes, I guess, our discussion. Do you have any further comments?
Well, I'm wondering if there's how we move forward from here.
Yeah, I think the purpose of putting it on the business agenda was to get the sense of the body that you would continue to have us move forward with that last step, which is to have legal counsel review the proposal that has come forward from GEI and has been looked at by VHB, and assuming that Anderson and Krager would see it the same way that VHB has posited, then we would then authorize the testing to be done as it's been outlined here tonight.
If I could make a comment about the timing of that, I went by the field today just to assess kind of where things are. I was pleased to see that where they are in the current construction is that there's access now that's been created through the initial steps of laying the new parking. Back to that, so there's easy access for the small-sized equipment that would be necessary to get back there. And
yeah, we would, Tom's right, we would want to do anything as soon as possible. The synthetic RFP is going out. We're still a ways off from laying down any turf under that, proposal that has previously been authorized by the public vote and town meeting. So, but we would want to have any kind of testing done before we're driving over any synthetic field.
And the field condition right now, it's hard to tell from outside the fence, but it looks like it's I don't know if the grass has been laid or not, but it's pretty much 3-foot-tall weeds, so I can't expect that there'd be any significant disruption to...
Yeah, to a final field, yeah, right, sure.
I'd hate to see us get to a point where the conditions have changed such that people would be concerned that it would be detrimental. It appears to me it could be done now with minimal disruption.
And assuming the board is in favor of the prospect, then I'm sure Art's office can turn around the
I see the hand.
paperwork.
Yeah.
For the preservation of Winchester places, for a better future and a better place. Winchester special places. To the fields and the shacks. Feels like Winchester's better.
So, as I was saying, I believe Art's office could probably turn the requested opinion around in weeks' time. Thereabouts.
And we would have it on the docket for the 14th? Or
Well, again, if we get the kind of sign-off that you've asked for on legal, we can wait until you see it on the 14th, or if we get it, we can authorize the testing to be done. You have another question right here.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to follow like all the acronyms and the names of the companies and all that, and it sounds like VHB or VHP is the same company on both sides here, like you guys
No.
hired them? and also the-
VHB is the town's consultant
Right.
for the 21E plan that has been filed at the site since the beginning of both the culvert project and the soil remediation. So they work for the town only.
Right, but I believe at the school committee meeting the
Yep.
other day, there was a representative from VHP speaking along with the Swim Winchester folks.
I don't, probably not. I know there was a VHB representative that spoke to
Okay, sorry, I
the
didn't-
chairperson, yeah, spoke to the chairperson at her request. She had asked the same questions that are kind of being asked tonight.
Gotcha, thanks.
So GDI is separate from VHP.
Yeah, they're doing the environmental for Swim Winchester.
And they compete.
It's a good question, it's a good question.
Very good question.
Very good question.
I think the earlier discussions over the last year or so that triggered the question, should we do a boring to find out soil conditions? If it turns out that that site has 8 or 10 feet of soil on top of 80 or 90 feet of peat, it may not be such an attractive site, so, I mean, presumably it may turn out to be something else, but, one of the questions was, is it financially feasible to build there? And if the answer is 90 feet, in the high school borings, I believe the town engineer went back and looked up the 1960s, 70s borings, and they hammered some down 20 or 30, others went down close to 100 or more feet, as I recall. So it's very patchy area. So the question we had was, let's not move ahead until we have some sense of what's out there underneath there, because it may be mush, it may not.
So again, you will authorize, authorization, if legal counsel signs off on what's been brought, you can bring it back.
Sense of the board, subject to council's approval to move ahead?
Council's review would be to ensure that we're not.
To ensure that we're not liable.
Review the scope that's been
And make sure
provided
that-
and signed off on by VHB.
I guess, I don't know, would attorneys usually come back with something that's that black and white, or is it gonna be some gray?
Let's.
He's wearing
back like.
He's wearing his gray suit tonight.
If there were any gray area at all, then management would not sign off on the authorization. If we have any sense that there's any exposure, the point was, would there be exposure on the town's side for the environmental issue? We think we've answered that, but if Art were to tell us, well, based upon what we see, there could be a potential, then we would hold off and bring that back to the board's attention. If Art agrees that with VHB, with what they have said today, again, no environmental liability or exposure to the town to authorize what's being asked for, then we would suggest that we just allow them to move forward, get this done.
Is there a time deadline involved here?
No.
Obviously-
Other than trying to do it before we get anything concrete down on Skilling's.
Obviously, would like to get it done before they start working on the synthetic turf field, and right now, that's
They
going
have a
out.
piece of equipment out there.
That's already, I think they just issued the bids for that, didn't they? I mean,
Yes.
it's not, it's imminent.
And Frank, if from the day we say go, how long is it before you get a contractor, a rig to do it? A couple weeks?
Typically, it'd be within 2 weeks.
So we're talking end of August, early September, even
Right.
if we do it tonight, so.
Right.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Can we see that legal memorandum or the notice, is this accessible by the public?
Yeah, would be a public document, yes.
Yeah.
No? Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't it be advantageous to complete the work before the kids are back in school?
Of course.
Be more convenient.
But there's no field.
Yeah.
There's no field out there for them to
But
be
the-
on.
But there will be ongoing work, because if they're gonna get the synthetic turf field installed for next season, they have to work this fall. So there will be ongoing work there in any event.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I guess wouldn't GEI, sounds like there's a window of time that they need to maybe order the rig, and by the time that happens, we'd have our next meeting to weigh in on any discussion that Anderson Superior comes up with.
Well, I think that we can, authorize them to do the scope of work conditional on council's approval. I mean, is that?
That's what we're proposing.
Yeah, that's
The other way of looking at it is the board wants to see what Anderson and Krieger says before you move forward, but
That would be my, I'm 20%, but I'd like to see it.
absolutely, whatever the board's pleasure is that way, I'm comfortable, but we always defer to what the board feels the right approach is.
Mariano,
Art, do you have any preliminary thoughts just on the discussion where, on this, do you see it coming back black or white, or some gray, or?
I can't answer that part because I haven't seen.
I was right.
Well, he hasn't seen the information.
I haven't seen what VHB has said.
Yeah.
I doubt they said zero exposure, because that's not defined in any place. The question is it a
Reasonable.
reasonable exposure, modest exposure, an exposure the board is prepared to live with? But not knowing what VHB has said, I can't possibly say what I would say.
Lance?
I'm inclined to go ahead with it, because I think the question needs to be answered. And I guess the fallback would be if Art turns up a significant concern, we could always post a meeting for later next week if we could get at least
Yeah.
3 of us around to discuss it and decide whether we want to go ahead or not with the, do a provisional, conditional approval. So the conditional approval would be, approve it conditionally pending,
Legal counsel's review and
Legal
approval.
counsel and his approval that it meets our conditions. If he comes back and says it's not, then we could, Chairman could call a brief meeting.
Or, we could certainly call a brief meeting. If that would satisfy you, Dave.
That way we're not delaying for 2 weeks.
Yes, sir.
While they're boring, who's going to be monitoring the dust and the air quality? Is that going to be still up to VHB that has monitoring in place to work with them to see what the dust, because they have dust protocols now for the drilling through this contaminated, whatever it is out there, incinerator ash or everything else, that they've been following. When it gets so much particles, they wet it, they do this, they treat it. They got a whole list of protocols for drilling out there now in the field for the project that's already going on. So who's going to monitor that they're not just pumping all this ash dust into our neighborhood?
Frank, did you want to comment on that?
You'd like me to respond to that? Well, first off, we as the engineer hire a drilling subcontractor, and we have a field representative out there observing and monitoring their activities.
Is it a licensed site professional or just a field?
Yeah, yes. What in the state are called LSPs, licensed site professionals. With respect to your question about, excuse me, dust and airborne things, The type of drilling that we do doesn't really generate, that it's not like an open earthwork activity. It's driving a 3-inch pipe or an auger in the ground and driving a soil sample and bringing it out, so it's all completely contained. Normally there's no dust, and that being a grass field at this point, you know, just the access of the drill rig to the site and back won't create any dust either. But we will have someone there to monitor.
Drilling through this incinerator ash,
Right, but that's
whatever
what.
things that are buried there from the dump, we don't know, because they basically, VHB mainly tested where they were gonna run through culvert and the remediation problem to install this culvert. They went over there and they said, okay, we'll take a couple of random ones here and there. They didn't, they mainly concentrated on the area of the new culvert on their project. So you really don't know what's there.
We're not, right, when the drill goes down, the cores come up, they're sealed and contained.
Right,
They're not open to the air.
they're inside the
They're inside
the
steel
sampler.
casing, yeah. So it's not dirt that's piled out, drilled out and piled out, it's a core sample that goes down and it's brought to the lab.
There's also noise and vibration associated with this drilling, if they're drilling into any kind of rock or whatever.
How many borings were there? No, it's killing everything.
Oh, there
There were 30 some odd that ran up the spine of the culvert, proposed culvert.
But there were 11 borings, according to VHB,
Soil,
soil borings to different depths in this area. Because they had to evaluate the entire site, not just the area where the culvert was being placed.
Jim, would you ask the gentleman in the blue shirt to identify himself?
Yes, could you identify yourself just for the record?
9 Winchester Street.
Okay.
So, I see, as far as the process, if we're going to authorize town council to review this, then I would say that would mean that if town council says that we don't have liability, that we would go forward with the boring. I see no reason to authorize the town council to review this if we're then going to turn around and say no to the boring afterwards. So I think that from a process standpoint, we either approve both now or not approve either now. But I don't see a reason to approve the review of the liability and not approve conditionally, the boring conditional to that review. So that's my view on that.
All right. Well, I think we've said that if the report comes back and it's ambiguous, or it's not.
The board has my assurance that and I understand the level of comfort that everybody was looking for on the original assignment, which was to determine that we could have a level of testing done without any potential exposure to the town. If Art in any way tells me that that is suspect, and again, VHB has looked at it, and they have signed off on it, but if Art in any way says there's some hesitation there, we would not move forward. Bring it back to the board for its attention and any other decision-making that had to be made. If, as I would expect, Art says the same thing that VHB has already said, we would say move forward with the testing plan, and we would have VHB monitoring the activity that's being done by GEI.
So I'm going to put a motion out. Or anyways, so, Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize Swim Winchester, through its consultant GEI, to conduct a Phase 1 study, including geotechnical borings to determine building conditions, not to include any environmental testing, subject to council review. Town council review, that is.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any discussion on that motion? Dave?
Yeah, I think putting that at the end, as long as we hear
Sign off.
town manager.
Yep.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor? Motion?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, we'll proceed with the, as discussed.
If we could get to Mr. Dean or someone, the
the opinion from Art and council and whatever we get back.
Yeah, we will, there'll be a
communicate to that.
compilation of the scope of work that's being proposed by GEI, VHB's assessment of that, and then town council's assessment of both of those things as it relates to the mass contingency plan, chapter 21E.
Does Patty have your contact information?
Supervisor is our neighborhood and friends president, and so I would communicate with her.
So,
Actually, I think she does.
Jim Mott has a question, Don.
yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, the representative of Friends and Neighbors of Swim Winchester, what's the relationship between that group and whoever's hiring GI to do the drilling? Is that the group that's
Swim Winchester?
paying them?
Yeah, Swim Winchester.
No, Swim
Friends and Neighbors.
Oh, Friends and
Same as
Neighbors, no, no.
Swim, no, it's not the same. Swim
Friends and Neighbors.
Winchester is a nonprofit that's been formed to promote the construction of a swimming pool in Winchester. The Friends and Neighbors
Of Skilling.
of Skillings are basically I guess in opposition to them.
Or a different way of saying they're in favor of open space.
Only on one site.
I understand. So my question pertains to Swim Winchester. Do they have insurance, or they'll be relying on GEI's insurance?
It's GEI, yeah, those terms that, under which we allow the testing would be approved by you and VHB.
Zero.
Yeah.
I provided to VHB a copy
of your
proposal,
protocol,
but if you
right.
need
Yeah,
one, I
that's it.
have.
So that's,
Okay.
that's in that
copy here.
email that you got. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir, Dave.
Chairman, so where's the school committee come in on this? Do we need any,
At this stage?
yeah,
No.
then we go on?
This is kind of an extension of your
Okay.
oversight on the mitigation.
The school committee is under the opinion that they have jurisdiction here and voted for.
They do have jurisdiction over both the Winchester High School site and the Skillings Field site. The town has jurisdiction over the DEP mitigation soil testing activity, not the school committee.
They have not voted to approve the drilling. Do they need to vote to approve the drilling?
We don't believe they need to do that, no.
That's where I was
Yeah.
heading, and I'm just curious.
That's, again, that's activity that the town has filed with DEP, not the school committee.
Let the school committee handle that.
Yeah, that, in other words, the town has paid for the cost of cleaning it up, not the school committee.
And the other way to think about it, the town owns the land, the school committee has the rights to the use of the land. And this is underneath the use. This is the soils issue.
So we will be maybe sending, as a matter of communication.
Oh, yeah, we're in communication
Yeah,
with Susan Radicchio.
As somebody mentioned, one of the, I think she's since left, they have been in contact with Susan Verdicchio, the chairperson, VHB has, and we have all along, and so they understand what's being proposed and what's being done.
All right, moving to the next item of business, which is the consent agenda.
I'm going to take these all at once.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Why don't you take the minutes separately and...
Yeah, the minutes separately. I'll start with the alcohol and beverage licenses. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve one-day alcohol and beverage licenses to the following applicants: Gail Freeman for Studio on the Common, August 16, 2017, at Studio on the Common; Archie McIntyre for Right Lock Farm Conservancy, August 3rd, 5th, 10th, 23rd, 26th, 2017, in the 1827 barn at Right Lock Farm; Paula Tognorelli for Griffin Museum, August 3rd, 2017. Philip Belts for Winchester Seniors Association, September 22nd, 2017, at the Jenks Center.
Okay. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the minutes as submitted for Monday, July 17th, 2017, and Monday, July 10th, 2017.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. All right.
We're good.
I noted in the communications that were attached, a question to the town manager, if he could update us on the situation relating to
39
Shore Road. Yes.
Yeah, so I've reviewed the letter submitted by the chair of planning and talked it over with Brian. There's a lot of discussion there, and to get to the point being made, I think it has to do with the parking space. My response, and I think my reaction would be to notify, so building does not approve the parking space, the permit for the parking space. The curb cut would be approved by the DPW. So what I would do, assuming the board wants action that's kind of being requested, is to notify the DPW that any parking space or curb cut for a parking space should only be done in conformance with the Central Business District zoning bylaw, and then let that, I assume most of the citations that are referenced in there are accurate. I didn't check the accuracy of those citations myself and the verbiage there. But if the point being made is no parking space unless it's in conformance with what was outlined in the letter, then that'll be the process that'll have to be followed by anybody. You know, I'll make in my memo, I'll make the point clear to DPW and Building Commissioner's office that any parking in the Central Business District should conform to the citations that are, being made by Ms. Welch, so we'll do that. The other references, they brought that owner back in. I don't know whether or not, if the board so desires, I can ask Art's office to check on whether or not we can get them to rebuild chimneys and stuff like that, but, I think we all understood that this is a permit request that, got a little bit ahead of the Building Commissioner's office and staff, and those oversights have been rectified by the work that's been done by Brian as the town planner and the Building Commissioner. We think everybody now knows that permits that are being pulled for this kind of repair activity now have to go through the analysis as to whether or not the design review procedure has to be adhered to. So this owner, as you know, came back in, submitted their plans to the commission that, I forget the entity that we actually call it, but it's a combination of design review and historic commission members, that they sat and understood what it was the owner/proponent was doing, and as I understood it from Brian, we're very satisfied, worked out happily. I don't think there was any duplicity in terms of chimneys haven't been taken down. I think that's a function of whether or not chimneys are useful, and if they're not going to be, I assume any one of us would take them down naturally, But unless, again, the board were to tell me that should be pursued to the extent anything like that can be rectified, I'll let Anderson and Craig know that we would do the analysis and chase it down, but my recommendation would be that we deal with the parking space as it's been outlined, and it's go ahead.
Art can correct me, but I think if the planning board disagrees with the building commissioner's decision, the planning board has to take initiative to contest it. I don't think it comes to the board of selectmen. I didn't go back, I don't know what they put in the CBD regs, but,
Yeah, we're talking about the overall repair or the chimneys?
Overall repair of chimneys, if that's a concern. I don't think we have, I don't think we have jurisdiction directly.
ZBA.
Could the planning board appeal
The building commissioners, a permit, and take it to the ZBA.
I would agree with Nancy, it's not in our realm.
I wonder if Jackie understands that's her.
Well, I think she was seeking,
Guidance.
not guidance, but, board concern and board direction to probably me, and then from me down to somebody like Al, to order that owner come back into the process, and I guess the end result that is at least being inferred to in the letter is that these chimneys be rebuilt, but, I mean, again, I'm not the zoning commissioner, I'm not the interpreter, I'm just telling you, I don't see it as a practical solution to that element of what's been raised. The parking spot is a different thing entirely, has not gotten approval yet, and, I think a memorandum along the lines of what I'm telling you I would do to all the respective departments. I think we would include engineering, but engineering, DPW, building commissioner's office, and planning, we would just put a memo to the file to make sure that any proposal to have off-street parking be in conformance with those sections that have been cited. And again, I'm assuming that Jackie has, Chairman Welsh has cited them appropriately, which I think is probably the case in my talking with Brian anyway.
Yeah, probably a solution, if the issue is the aesthetic look of the building with the chimneys, I think there are probably solutions that are short of rebuilding complete chimneys. You can have things that look like.
Yeah, brick facade.
Brick facade on top of things.
Because you're not gonna put in a working chimney.
And you're not gonna get the historic colonial brick that it's probably already been hauled off to a landfill.
But I think this is, from that distance, you can make it look like colonial brick.
Yeah.
But again, I think this is a decision that the planning board, the design review, and the ZBA have to make.
Yeah, it could be that the owner will voluntarily come back and take under consideration what's being asked for. Just from previous experience, and I'm not asking not to weigh in, but I will tell you that I'm sure the insurer of the building would say, if it's not an active chimney, that the bricks should come down above the roof line, just for liability purposes. I mean, we just had a woman recently, I forget which town it was.
Yeah. The chimney fell on top of her.
Fell on top of her, so I'm sure any insurer would be concerned about the fact that, that part of the structure, if it remained above the roof line, had no practical use, that it probably should be capped and trimmed to some level anyway. But if we can always ask that the owner's been cooperative up to this point, can always.
When the owner.
This is not a board decision, I think this is.
No, just a question though, when the owner came back, you mentioned that it was design review and the historic commission, but isn't the planning board the permitting authority in the center business district, and were they involved in that
No, it
discussion?
didn't rise to that level where they needed a permit. This is a renovation permit.
Okay.
So all it triggered was, that design
review.
review. It wasn't a special permit.
Okay.
I think it's incumbent on the planning board to go back to the owner and discuss it. It's a look-alike.
No.
If that's critical.
Okay, any other comments from anybody at this point? Mike?
A couple comments. The other kind of outstanding item for us, maybe we can get on the agenda for the 14th, is the appointment of the member to the Historical Commission. I know it's been kind of out there for...
Yep, we're ready to bring that forward.
Okay.
It's fine to do it.
Okay, so we'll add that on the 14th. And I'm not sure where we are with the zoning enforcement officer as well. Are we going to move town meeting on that, or?
Yeah, I think we thought that if the board wants to take it into a direction where there's some bifurcation between zoning enforcement officer and building inspector / building commissioner's responsibility under the zoning bylaw, that's probably more of a budgetary thing.
Right, okay.
Right.
So,
And we've kind of been waiting for the new HR person to come in so they can draft up a description of the work to be done, so we can advertise the position.
Okay, okay.
And did we look into revenue generation to offset that through?
Well, that's another subject for us to take up,
Yeah.
as to whether we're going
Fees
to,
and building.
whether we're going to
Got
add
that one.
additional fees.
I think we did some
To offset
comparison
that.
to, yeah.
I think we need,
If that moved forward, right?
Yeah, in regards to fees as well, I know that we had talked about the one-day alcohol licenses as well, and kind of evaluating.
What kind of discretion you had?
Yeah, not just the discretion, but what we're charging, and
And
for
whether or
smaller
not we do
events.
charge, like for Jenks and,
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
if it's necessary. So I think especially when you see, all these licenses coming through, and some of them are large scale, some of them are small, but I think that we need to be a little bit more specific about what we're charging whom, to make sure people get what they need. The other question I had too was on the solicitation bylaw. If we've, I know that we're going to be back in front of town meeting. Dave, I don't know if you've.
I talked to the chief maybe
Okay.
a week ago, we were supposed to.
A few people have reached out
There's a
that wanted
couple,
to be a part of that conversation.
committee process, I don't know that we've, Gotten,
If you tell me who wants to jump in, again, I know we talked to the chief.
Yep.
Not too long ago.
Okay.
Getting ready again for round 3.
Yep, and the other issue is, have we heard on the CVS project if there's been an appeal yet?
didn't talk to the attorney representing the owners, and as of the kind of week or two after the decision, all they knew was that CVS was going to take the appeal period. Probably they did not expect an appeal of the judge's ruling to be made, but I think they expected that they would determine whether or not they could comply with the rulings that the judge issued about the interpretation of the town's bylaw, and resubmit an application for a store to the ZBA, to the building commissioner and then the ZBA. So that was the expectation, that they would hear within 30 to 60 days from the development group as to whether or not they would proceed that way. And if not, then probably there would be some kind of decision-making to release the owner from the obligation.
So just out of curiosity, so, as I understand it from the case, there were, the judge had ruled that there was issues related to the setbacks and then the parking space sizes.
Correct.
And then- So if CVS complied with that, so you're saying that they would have to go,
They would resubmit for another special permit.
really, well, I'm just curious, I would have thought that if they were issued a permit and then they complied with it, they would, but it is what it is. They-
Well, it's not, they're not insignificant changes.
changes, yes.
So just if you're just looking at the frontage along Washington Street
Right.
and Swanton Street
Yeah,
alone,
yeah.
20 feet eliminated by, what, 200?
Right.
100 on each,
Yeah.
right? So 20 by 200
Yeah.
is 4,000 square feet lost, right?
Right.
They have to provide parking for any mezzanine area that's non-retail,
Yeah.
so additional spaces, and the spaces
Yeah, so it
have to be
shrinks.
larger.
It's obviously gonna shrink it, but.
Oh, yeah, so that's what they were determining, whether or not, under those conditions, they could put a footprint that was satisfactory
Has
to,
anybody done that analysis to see what the building size would go to?
well, I think that's what CVS was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether they could live with it.
Right.
Well, as we embark on the, housing production plan tomorrow, Mario and I are meeting with the group tomorrow. I mean, it would be really an ideal location for the town to to do a project, so, the sooner.
Whether or not it could be a residential footprint, that's,
The question we go back to is the one that dealt with 6 years ago, something like that, when it first started, was, we discussed with both CVS and the neighbors what they were gonna do, because the planning board had to make a recommendation. And at the time, the question to the neighbors was, what do you want the project to look like if CVS goes ahead and secures a permit and builds it? What do you want it to look like? And then the alternative was, what happens if they don't go ahead with it? What do you want on that site? And I don't know how close we are to, it sounds like we're almost at that decision again. And I think at the first set of discussions, the neighbors said, thank you very much, we don't want anything there, we're gonna win. So we never got to the question of what happens if CVS pulls out. So I think Mike's question is a good one, that we ought to be through the planning board or through some other mechanism, maybe the production plan.
Yeah.
Ought to be beginning to take a serious look at, what do you want if CVS stays there? And we originally told, we offered them the idea of doing a mixed-use development, CVS on the ground floor and residential offices, but at the time, they said, quite diplomatically say this, but they said, thanks, drop dead, that's not our business model. So maybe they'll come back. They have plenty of CVS stores around metropolitan areas that have mixed use or in mixed use buildings. So it's conceivable that they'll be more willing to talk about that. But if they don't, does the neighborhood want, mixed use, single family, duplex?
well, I think you have to consider what the owner
Right,
wants.
that's,
The owner
We don't own the property.
What we say is, you probably, if it's a 40B, you're looking at 30 to 35 units an acre. That's,
I mean,
nobody else is wavering
this
from
discussion
that.
ought to be started again soon.
But we'll be in a reactionary mode because we don't own the
Or we
property.
also have the opportunity of rezoning the area
Yeah.
if the owner wanted to put in something else.
40R,
40 Rs, some sort of, we've created special overlay districts for other projects.
Yeah.
If you've got the CBD, which does that, you've got models for that sort of thing. Conceivably, the owner would want to do something that's not 40R or 40B, or you want to use a model on one of those. None of those discussions have started.
Right.
It might be useful to poke people to see if they're all interested in starting the discussion.
well, again, I think it's CVS that controls the site,
Yeah, oh yes, no, we'll have to wait and see what they do, but.
until the middle of next year is my understanding, so, if they want to.
If they want.
Yeah, okay. I think we beat that to death. All right, just to thank you for coming in and limiting your comments to a single individual. It helps keep us from staying here till midnight, so we appreciate that. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. That'd be 10:10.
We need to sign the,
Sign the bond.
bunch of things.